Thank you for watching. My name's Glenn Morgan, and welcome back to another episode of We the Governed. Now, just a quick warning to you as I'm in the studio here today, I'm going to be talking about a subject that is kind of a part in a series, and it's going to be an interesting one if you care about Washington State and the history of Washington State. More significantly, why we find ourselves in the position that we're in right now as the Democrats proceed in their long march to the Utopia. And unless you think that this is an isolated incident in Washington State, you're sadly mistaken because, frankly, if you live in any blue state in America, it's the same basic program, basic plan, and it's the same thing that you see happening in every blue city in red states as well, and in the red states where they're asleep at the switch, and this inevitable insanity is basically occurring there. So today we're going to be dealing with part two in this long march towards the Democrats' utopia, and we're going to be focused on the power grid today. Now, if you saw my video last week, I did the first one, which was about the growth and bloat of taxes and the inevitable and insatiable desire to really, it's insatiable, but trying to push the inevitable greed of government. Today, I'll be talking about the power grid and the total war that's been declared on the power grid in an effort to increase the cost of power for everybody. And coming up, part three will be about public safety. We'll also be talking about public education, such as it is. We're going to be talking about grant grifting. Ultimately, we'll be talking about bureaucratic bloat. And finally, we'll be talking about censorship and secrecy in government, all part of the wonderful long march to utopia that Democrats aspire to have everywhere they are in government. Now, just a quick reminder, if you haven't done so already, please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you like this video or any of the others that I have, please feel free to share those with others. I absolutely guarantee you we are being censored and shadow banned by YouTube and anywhere else these videos show up. And it's because they certainly don't want you to be aware or familiar with any of these topics. So let's just jump right into it. Our part two, the power grid, a key element in the Democrats' essential long march towards the utopian dream that they want us all to share. Now, any of you who have paid any attention to this channel over the years, you know I've done a number of different videos, various topics that were related to the power grid. I did a video here about Governor Inslee basically using the vax mandates to essentially help damage and put our power grid at risk at the time when he was firing people who were out working by themselves remotely in the wilderness, trying to fix and maintain that power grid and getting rid of them because they didn't take the vax, because, boy, that was sure a high priority at the time. Then, of course, you also saw videos I did here about the war on the Snake River dams and some of the related attacks legislatively the Democrats have launched and socialists in general have launched against the power grid in Washington State, and also actual attacks on the power grid and the clear and obvious vulnerabilities that we have. This was about the attack up in Pierce County a couple years ago where they shut down multiple substations. And I've done a number of stories on just different issues related to that. But if you want to focus on Washington State's power grid, you have to pay attention to the dams. And just go back here right now. I mean, this is a Grand Coulee Dam. We have a number of different dams like this. We have lots of them all over Washington State. In fact, the only way to understand power in the Pacific Northwest at all is to understand hydropower, because the dams that were put in during my great-grandfather and grandfather's era were a key and fundamental building block to the prosperity and economic boom that occurred in Washington State. Additionally, most Washington State dams, especially the ones on the Snake River and the Columbia River, also have multiple other benefits. One of the obvious benefits that they bring to the people who live there is, number one, is flood control. We have massive volume of rain, and there is such a thing as gravity, even though the left wants to deny both the concept of rain and gravity, but they do exist despite their denials, and it creates massive problems with flooding. And having a series of dams on major rivers like the Columbia and the Snake River and other rivers in Washington State, it provides a tremendous benefit in regulating the uncontrolled flooding that otherwise will occur. Secondly, it also provides an opportunity for, especially in eastern Washington, you see this more, where they can provide year-round irrigation to a lot of what would otherwise be dryland farming. And this is a substantial benefit, one of the reasons why Washington State's a major wheat producer, why eastern Washington produces large numbers of fruit crops, things like apples and cherries and other crops all over the place. It's because of the ability to irrigate, and the irrigation is very inexpensive when you're able to dam the otherwise uncontrollable flood of water that seasonally will come down these rivers. and to regulate that flow and be able to use much of it for irrigation. Finally, you do have the benefit, which is less significant benefit, but a benefit nonetheless, of being able to recreate on the large lakes essentially that are created behind these dams. Now, this is a substantial benefit in Washington state. It's more than just hydropower, but hydropower is a big part of it. And since we're focused on the power grid in this video, it is something that you have to fundamentally understand about the Pacific Northwest. Washington state is one of the only states in America whose the vast majority of the power that we get comes from hydro dams. It's about 69% or more. It sort of depends on which study you look at, but in some places it's nearly all the power that they get. It's a big deal. Now, we don't just have that. We do have something like this TransAlta plant. This is one of the power plants near me, and it's the main power plant near me, and it is a coal-fired plant. It's the only one in Washington state, and of course, the state has declared total war on that and has plans to shut it down, and the federal government has had to intervene to prevent the state from shutting it down to avoid potential blackouts and other power shortages in the near future. And of course, Washington state's governor has decided that it is his highest priority to attack the feds and to make them shut down this power plant without any real replacement option there, because it wouldn't be a bad location. You could convince me that maybe a nuclear power plant could be located there. It's on a massive area that's been there for over 120 years, and it's kind of a big place. And but of course, you can't expect any rational thought from any Democrat administration, at least in the last few decades. And so they've declared war on that plant as well. We also have one nuclear power plant in the Tri-Cities, but generally, for the most part, hydropower is the majority of the power that's generated in Washington state. We do have windmills that have gone up, subsidized, heavily subsidized windmills that have helped double the power bill for most people in Washington state, all over, dotting the landscape in eastern Washington in particular. You'd really notice this more. The most significant it's kind of along the Columbia Gorge and in many different farm fields in eastern Washington. You notice them most significantly if you're driving over I-90 and you're going down the Vantage Hill or up the Vantage Hill. You'll see them all over, and they're most noticeable there. But they're dotted all over the landscape. Very expensive to run, intermittent power, but they do exist, and it is part of the Pacific Northwest landscape, at least until the blades have to be replaced. And then you also, to some extent, it's a little bit more limited. You do have basically solar field farms, put out solar panel farms. There is an effort, like in places like the San Juans, where you have particularly more significant delusional leadership, where they try to pretend like they're farming solar panels, and they actually try to say that with a straight face, and they're trying to destroy farmland in San Juan County, of all things, so they can put in solar panels instead. There's a little bit of that eastern Washington. The Pacific Northwest in general is not quite as friendly to solar panels, just because of our latitude and also the fact that it is cloudy and rainy here quite a bit. But it makes a little bit more sense in some places. Again, this is different than an individual doing it. These are heavily subsidized, government subsidized loans, grants, and a way to make your power bill a lot more expensive. And so you will see these around Washington state periodically. But when we're really talking about the war led by the Democrats' policies, I mean, very clearly, they have a direct war they've declared entirely on the entire power grid in Washington state. The outcome of this, of course, is the substantial increase in costs for every single person in Washington state. The cost of living has gone up substantially when it comes to power. We're not as high as some other states yet because we had a very low level to start out with. As it turns out, water falling and gravity happen to be a lot cheaper than putting up multi-million-dollar solar panels and multi-million-dollar windmills that fail and have intermittent power. And as it turns out, gravity, despite the denial of the Democrats, it still works, and it's been ongoing for a long time. But there is a strong declared war on the power grid in Washington state. Part of it's this clear war on dams. When I say a war on dams, I'm really talking about an effort to try to take them out. They have successfully taken out some small dams in Washington state, up in Clown County. There's a few other places they've succeeded in doing this. And it hasn't made life better. It's made life worse. And sometimes they'll use some of the tribes in Washington state. We have a lot of Native American tribes here. And the tribes are usually used as front people or puppets for the environmental movement. They're easy scapegoats to have them throw them out front, claim that they're trying to restore the river to its original flood-prone disaster zone operations, and use that as an excuse, sometimes pretending to save the salmon, even if they kill them all. small. They're happy to take this kind of an approach and excuse in order to use any excuse, really, that they can to pull out and destroy the dams so that the investment of previous generations can be taken out. Now, fortunately, despite this war on dams, the federal government has intervened, especially in the Columbia Basin along the Snake River, to prevent these dams from completely being removed, despite the environmental and former Inslee administration and the Ferguson administration now, and their goal to make life more miserable for people and take them out. So far, most of this effort has failed, but it is an ongoing effort. It's a diehard part of the Democrats' power plan in Washington State. One of the key elements of this was during the Inslee administration when they want to pretend that dams are not renewable. And this, again, goes back to the denial of the existence of gravity and the fact that they don't believe rain really happens here. Despite having one of the highest rainfalls of any state in America on a regular basis for the last, say, half a century, they continue to try to focus on pretending that the rain and gravity are not renewable. It's unclear what they think that they would replace that with, but nevertheless, this is a continuous stream of denial. It might make sense if you graduate from Evergreen State College, but it doesn't make sense to anybody else. And by claiming that it's not renewable, this provided them the justification and excuse. Because remember, we're the only state in America that's dumb enough to say that. But this claim basically politically allows the Democrat Party to create massive grift and power subsidized operations for much more costly, less consistent, and less effective power generation. We see that all over the place because this is essentially what led to the excuse that the Democrats have. And believe me, this is a partisan thing. The Democrats have primarily and almost exclusively been the ones pushing for subsidized wind and power subsidize, basically forcing Puget Sound Energy or PUDs to get a certain percentage of their power from intermittent and super expensive wind and basically solar power. So this is a way to increase costs. This is one of the reasons why you pay a lot more in your power bill than you used to. And this is one of the reasons why they claim that gravity and hydropower is not renewable. And of course, this also serves as kind of a fundamental foundational opportunity to create all kinds of fake scams and grifting operations inside of the power grid justification. So things like the Climate Commitment Act, which was a total scam and a tax that basically is added to every gallon of gas that you purchase in the state of Washington. But a lot of people have forgotten that it's also added as an increase in cost on the power bill that you pay through the utilities. And remember, Governor Bob Ferguson, when he was Attorney General, threatened all the utilities and Puget Sound Energy and everybody, all the PUDs. He threatened them and threatened them with litigation and lawsuits if they dared to actually reveal on the power bill how much more you're paying for your power. But it's a substantial amount, and all it is to create a extraction scheme so that they can increase the cost of living and decrease the affordability of living, and take that and create a multi-billion-dollar slush fund at the Department of Commerce, and they call it the Climate Commitment Act, because they expect that most of you will never pay any attention to what they're doing with your money. And this is a direct pass-through increase in cost of living to you and I and everybody else who actually uses power in the state. And then, of course, there's the shutdown of the power plants. I mentioned TransAlta is a good example, but this is just a consistent theme that we have seen the Democrats have in our state, and it's a big part of their power agenda. Whatever they can do to make power less consistent. And remember, Washington State's a net power exporter. We produce more power than our state needs, and this serves as a source of revenue. We provide power from our dams, and we distribute it all over many states in the Pacific Northwest. So as our power production goes down and population increases and power needs increase, then it reduces the ability of us to sell that power to other states. And it also basically means that we are rapidly approaching the point where power blackouts, which were pretty much unheard of before in the Pacific Northwest, that if the Democrats get their way and achieve the utopian dream that they have, power blackouts would become a common way of life, just like they are in some other parts of the country, like California. Now, the other thing that all kind of rolls into this, of course, is the inevitable Pacific Northwest in general power costs going from one of the lowest in the industrialized world, and certainly the lowest in America, to and by the way, this is why we used to have a lot of aluminum plants that were located here and other high power usage industries, because the power in Washington State was so inexpensive that you could cost justify locating these big power power plant or aluminum smelters and other type data centers, all kinds of other things in Washington State because we had a very low power cost. Our basis of cost was very low with hydropower. It's not that hydropower doesn't cost anything, but the big investment, once it's done, it really minimizes the future costs of producing that power year after year. Yes, they have to do some maintenance on it, of course, but it's nothing like what they have to do with solar and wind, which is much more costly on a regular basis. And this here is basically the Democrat Party, and it has been the Democrat Party exclusively and primarily leading the charge in every one of these issues as a way to destroy and attack and increase the cost of the power grid. Right now, if you live in Washington State, you're probably aware that Puget Sound Energy, among other PUDs, they're going to be jacking up the power costs somewhere around 36% over the next 4 to 5 years. That is a direct policy decision that is caused exclusively by the Democrat policies that they have pushed down our throats. It's a big part of their agenda, and I know they pretend to care about affordability, but at the end of the day, they really don't. This is one of those key things that most people have to use power in a modern industrialized society, and they're making it a lot more costly for you and anyone else who happens to live here. So at the end of the day, if you want to understand the Democrat Party's primary approach to Washington State, they have basically implemented a large basket of terrible policy ideas, lit the fuse, and they're sitting back waiting with just glee and excitement to see what happens when that fuse runs out. And it doesn't seem like the outcome's going to be as great as they think it will be. It might be something closer to the Mount St. Helens. Now, that's a Pacific Northwest illusion. If you went to public school recently and you may not understand what happened there when Mount St. Helens blew up, it's not good if you're close. And that is one of the challenges that the Democrat Party has handed to us as they've lit the fuse on this policy and some of the other policies I'll continue on in this series here as we discuss the Democrats' trip to the utopian dream that they all apparently want us to live in right here. It's not hard to figure this stuff out, and you can go back and look directly at the policies that they've tried to implement. Some of them they haven't been successful yet, but boy, are they striving and working hard, and Governor Bob Ferguson is right in the middle of it, along with the rest of the major Democrats who are elected in Washington State. Now, this is just, it is reality. It's important to face this and to recognize what it is. But if you want to change it, you have to change who the politicians are that represent you in Olympia. You have to be willing to show up and push back. It means you have to vote. I know sitting back and saying your vote doesn't matter and therefore why should you vote? Well, if you don't vote, probably somebody else will for your ballot. That's the joys and wonder of having a mail-in ballot system. It is certainly worth getting that ballot in regardless. It is worth participating in the process. It is a pathetically small amount of time, the energy you put into doing that, and in comparison to people who are spent a lot more time trying to fight and fix these issues, it is just the bare minimum of at least being involved to some extent. And then after that, we have to be willing to show up to push back and to reverse some of the more absurd and ridiculous policy schemes that the Democrats have pushed on us successfully and unsuccessfully so far. So with that, I hope you look forward to part number 3. I will be doing a series of other videos in between. I'm not just going to have all of these videos in a row, but this is part 2. I promised it last week, and I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what your thoughts are if you go down to the comment section below. And remember, I'm going to end this video like I do all the videos that I produce. If you care about the future and you want to make a difference, you need to be willing to show up, not just once, but repeatedly. It's about showing up consistently over time, because in the end, that's the only way to make a difference. It's the only way to change the future, because the future belongs to those who show up.